Good morning, Professor Bell.
Good morning, Stephen. Great to see you again.
It's good to see you again, sir. But thank you very much for joining us for the podcast today. Professor Bell, would you be in a position to tell the audience a little bit about your professional background and how you ended up where you are today, please, sir?
Well, thanks, Stephen. So my background is I'm a physician. I'm a respiratory physician based in Queensland Health. So I've worked in the public health system in Queensland for the last 27 years. As a respiratory physician, my area of focus is adult cystic fibrosis. And I received training in Sydney, then in Cardiff in the UK, where I did my research higher degree, and then returned to Sydney to train in lung transplantation, and then landed in Queensland.
Okay. And what are you currently doing in Queensland?
Well, my day job is I'm the Chief Executive Officer of the Translational Research Institute, which is based on one of the health campuses, the Princess Alexandra Hospital in Brisbane. And this institute is relatively new. It opened for business in early 2013. We have around 1,100 people in the building, including 800 biomedical researchers and their students. We have around 200 professional staff across 4 research partners in TRI, and we have about 150 startup industry professional staff working across 10 startup companies based within the building.
The Translational Research Institute. Would you tell me something about what is translational research?
Well, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to define because, like beauty, translation is really the personal perspective of what it means. Everyone wants to be a translational researcher because it helps you gain health and medical research funding across the world. But in my mind, translational research is taking discovery science through its development either directly into the clinic, where it changes practice. It might be a new diagnostic, it might be a new way of practicing, and it evaluates and then implements it into the clinic. What we're focused on as well is how we might translate those discoveries, novel discoveries, into potentially novel diagnostics, novel therapeutics, or even novel devices, and where the discovery scientists, either directly or with the assistance of medtech companies, evaluate, do the preclinical work, and then the clinical trials. And ultimately, a new therapeutic, diagnostic, or device then is available for implementation in the clinic.
All right, thank you very much for that. Recently, I was lucky enough to see you in Spain at the Respiratory Congress giving a lecture, and I understand that the Lancet Respiratory Medicine Commission was unveiled there, which you were part of. Would you tell me something about that?
Look, this was something that the editor of Lancet Respiratory asked a colleague of mine, Dr. Felix Ratchen from Sick Kids in Toronto, and I to lead. And we were asked to develop a blueprint for the future care of people with cystic fibrosis. And foolishly, we took on that challenge, not really realizing what that would involve. We then spent the next 18 months working with 40 internationally recognized CF clinicians and CF scientists to develop that blueprint. And that really looked at how we might better diagnose, how we might better deliver clinical care, how that clinical care might be translated to low middle income countries, the potential position for new CFTR small molecule treatments such as CFTR modulators and other similar care. And then finally, how to engage with community. So how to get patient and family and community involvement in improving healthcare delivery.
All right.
So it was a really fabulous opportunity. I learned immensely from the 40 colleagues that Felix and I worked with. And, you know, it has had its impact in terms of policy delivery on the ground, both in countries where there's excellent healthcare systems and in countries where there's relatively lower healthcare delivery, particularly for this population. And then I guess proof is that it's been highly cited, over 500 sites in the last 4 years.
We were very impressed with the Tritherapy work that was done in Australia regarding cystic fibrosis. And I understand you had something to do with it.
Yes. You know, for most of my clinical and research career, the pharmaceutical industry had little to offer clinicians and their patients in cystic fibrosis. And in fact, most of the clinical trials that I was lucky enough to be involved with were investigator-initiated studies. And I would use an example of the hypertonic saline inhaled trial, which was established by one of my close friends, colleagues, and mentors, Professor Peter Bai from Royal Prince Alfred Hospital in Sydney. And he made the observation from reports from his patients that when they surfed, they cleared more mucus from their airways. And he wanted to test that with hypertonic saline. And so he developed a program, was funded by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. It was the first clinical trial funded outside North America, based in Australia. And this was a very successful trial that demonstrated the utility clinically and in a tolerable fashion of inhaled mucolytic in hypertonic saline. Cheap, readily available, and for some leading to a significant improvement in lung function and quality of life. Shortly after that, we started to get other therapeutics like Dornase alpha and other inhaled antibiotics, Toby, but they were mostly trials based in the Northern Hemisphere, in Europe and North America. And it wasn't until the CFTR modulator therapies started to become available, and the very first one of those was ivacaftor, which was led by the pharmaceutical biotech company Vertex, now a blockbuster company, but at a fairly early stage. Back in 2008 and 2009, it decided to start its phase 3 clinical trial program in many countries, including Australia. And they liked coming to Australia because our regulatory processes, our ethics and governance processes were pretty streamlined. So getting to clinical trials to patients was quite rapid in Australia. And even though we've got a relatively low population, we've got about 2% of the global CF population, we punched above our weight in terms of recruitment. And importantly, also the quality of the clinical trials data was something that many pharmaceutical companies talk about well outside respiratory medicine and outside cystic fibrosis. And, you know, it was useful for us because, you know, I never thought that we would see a therapeutic so impactful on patients so quickly. So to give you a couple of examples of patients at day 5, when they came back to the clinic, they commented on, I'm clearing mucus that has been down there for years. It's absolutely disgusting, but I feel so much better. My dog is not licking my salty skin like it used to. And my sinuses are flowing like they never had. These are all common manifestations of cystic fibrosis. So we knew pretty early on that 50% of the patients were coming back and saying, this is absolutely game-changing, and 50% of the patients saying, gee, I'm not sure that I'm not wasting yours and my time. And so we were lucky to be involved in the first phase 3 ivacaftor trial. And since then, Australian sites have been heavily involved, and it's been because we recruit and the quality of the data in the patients recruited is of high quality. And that's not just been the CFTR modulators through Vertex, there's been other modulator type trials over the past, well, now 15 years.
When we talk about the collection of data, is there a registry associated with the tritherapy that you're part of?
So no, that's a good question, Stephen. In the clinical trials, it's all heavily regulated by the sponsor with a clinical research organisation, CRO, that manages the clinical trials. However, in collaboration with the Australian Cystic Fibrosis Registry, and as required by our funding bodies, the requirement was for ongoing data collection. These are, some might say, prohibitively expensive drugs, and government have been very generous in providing funding for at least $200,000 per patient per year. And their expectation of the clinics and of the pharmaceutical company was to provide post-marketing surveillance to demonstrate long-term impact. Is there investment by the Australian government and other Commonwealth, other national governments? Are we getting the benefit that has been demonstrated in the much shorter phase 3 clinical trials? And are there as yet unmasked long-term adverse events that are going to limit quality of life improvement in the long term? So working together, the Commonwealth with the Australian CF Registry and the clinics that are recruited and enter their patients' data in to the registry have worked together with Vertex to ensure that that long-term data is secured and delivered and demonstrated to the Commonwealth Government on behalf of the Australian population long-term benefits for their investment or taxpayers' investment, which is not insignificant.
Are patient-reported outcomes used?
That's a very good question. They are in the clinical trials. In terms of the registry, that's been a point of discussion for the last 10 years. And it's a work in progress, I'd have to say, because it requires quite a lot of work at the clinic level, and the level of investment and support required to deliver on a long-term patient-reported outcome is quite hard to maintain. Some parts of the world, including Canada, have been trialling patient engagement with entry into the registry, such as patients delivering the patient-reported outcomes directly to the registry. But it's in a fairly early stage of development there.
What I'd also like to talk about in your organisation is that you've got a number of interesting programs running. You've got the Australian Centre for Complex Integrated Surgical Solutions, you've got immunotherapy, diagnostic imaging, you've got the microbiomes. Would you tell me something about some of these amazing programs that are inside of that silo of yours?
So I guess we wanted at the end of our first decade to really understand what the top 10 translational achievements in the first decade were. And we sought submissions, we had an independent committee judge those, and some of them included a centre for personalised analysis of cancers using organoid technology, so mini organs, assessment of a new and novel approach to the treatment of rheumatoid arthritis, and similarly to acute myeloid leukemia. We've also been trying to understand better ways of treating post-transplant lymphoma, an oral saliva test for, a saliva test for oral and throat cancers, and new technologies to better detect and earlier detection programs for melanoma. You're quite right that there have been the Centre for the Access program, I should say. This program has really tried to do two things: develop ways to use 3D imaging to better allow surgeons and their teams to plan complex surgery, and then to deliver on bespoke surgical innovations for very complex surgeries, such as replacement of a jaw after oral cancer surgery, which has also been damaged by radiotherapy. And these programs really have demonstrated very short timeframes from developing an innovation through to implementation in the clinic. And now they're going back to actually understand the impact on patients with clinical trials. You also mentioned the gut microbiome program. So Professor Jean Tyson of the Queensland University of Technology is under, with a very rapidly growing team, is better understanding the impact of the gut microbiome on diseases outside the gut, including neurological complications, immune system complications. This is an area of much debate until fairly recently, and an emerging body of evidence that the microbes in our gut very much influence systemically other diseases, immune diseases, neurological diseases, cancers potentially. And Jean Tyson, working with one of his former colleagues, Professor Phil Hugenholtz, have also spun out a company called Microba. Microba is based separately from Jean's academic work within TRI, and it is looking at gut microbiome diagnostic platforms. It's developed around a 30,000 patient gut microbiome database, and they're now taking the learnings from those works into developing potential therapeutic platforms where specific microbes can be put back into the gut of various gut disease patient groups, such as inflammatory bowel diseases. So it's gone from being largely a interrogation of the gut microbiome with a huge database to support that, into a diagnostic platform, and now even to a therapeutic platform. So this is really a really interesting translational pathway from academic medicine into a startup company that's now starting to look at therapeutics for gut diseases.
Which is one of the many things the organisation has been able to achieve through translational research. Work done in rheumatoid arthritis is outstanding in your organisation. Can you tell me something about that?
Well, firstly, that program, there's a number of different PIs involved in that program, but the program itself on rheumatoid arthritis is actually led by Professor Ranjani Thomas. Ranjani trained with Ian Fraser, the famous Ian Fraser, co-inventor of Gardasil, and also the inventor of our whole research institute, I must say. He was the one who lobbied government, Chuck Feeney and others to raise this building from the ground. Ranjani is a clinician. She's a rheumatologist, but she's also a basic scientist, a discovery scientist, and she really leads the way of helping support our discovery scientists, our basic biomedical scientists, into understanding that their area of research not only is a source of high profile and high impact papers, potentially outcomes for research higher degree students and successful grant income for the universities, but also that they can take their discoveries on a journey of translation, which they might be able to be involved with by spin-out companies and working with large pharma to actually develop new programs of therapeutics. This is a relatively modest cohort of people in most research organisations. Most biomedical researchers get excellent research outcomes, and they enhance theirs and their universities' profile through the classic metrics of student completions, high impact papers, and research income. Many, I should say, biomedical researchers don't get the element of you can actually take your discoveries and move forward a translational pathway to potential new diagnostics. And most biomedical researchers are not going to do that because they know the valley of death and the high risk that'll distract them from the classic metrics that the universities employed them to achieve.
I think the organisation is quite a rare organisation in terms of taking an academic piece of work and turning it into a commercial success. So I think what you've achieved is quite outstanding.
Well, it's nice for you to say it, but look, I think we're at an early stage of development. There's a lot more potential. And I guess if you would ask the question, where would you like this organisation to be in 10 years and what it'd be known for? I'd like to grow the proportion of Ranjani Thomases and Ian Frasers across a much broader group of PIs and researchers who are absolutely superb in their field to be on that journey that Ranjani and Ian have been on previously. Our organisation has much greater depth of its connection with the biotech industry, that we have more biotechs wanting to know what's happening inside the building, and thereby more big international pharma interested in the research that is undertaken here. And as you know, we've got Sanofi as a part of the Translational Science Hub based here, which is a collaboration between the University of Queensland, one of the TRI partners, Griffith University, which is another university based in Queensland, and Queensland Government. And that translation hub is based within our organisation. And so therefore, the researchers here have an opportunity to actually have a dialogue with large pharma as well as small pharma.
Professor Bell, how is the Institute funded?
So this is a very complex organisation. Most medical research institutes in Australia are either under the umbrella of a university or, at the other end of the spectrum, independent. And we've got a mixture of that because TRI has 4 partners, 2 universities. I know that's hard to understand how that could be, but we have the University of Queensland and Queensland University of Technology based within the organisation. And we have 2 health services, Mater and Queensland Health. And the goal here is to actually get all those people working together in a strong research partnership to support the pipeline of discovery through to translation into better health outcomes for our population. And that's funded. Our funding, 2/3 of our funding comes from the support of those 4 partners. 1/3 of our funding comes from various commercial activities that go on within the building, including large pharma, biotech pharma, that pay license fees to actually work within this organisation.
I understand. Does the organisation have any involvement in new patents that are unfolding by the research?
So TRI, when it was developed, it was decided that TRI would not own the IP, that if there was IP generated, say, by a researcher within QUT or within Queensland Health, that would be owned by and developed through their tech transfer partners by that organisation.
Okay. So do you have a tech transfer operation?
No, but the partners each do.
If people are interested in working with you, with the organisation, someone from abroad, for example, or someone from another state, how would they go about it? They would approach yourself?
Oh, very happy for them to approach myself, but we also have a team of research to clinic translational experts led by Helen Benham, who is also a consultant rheumatologist, and her team help link internally researchers with clinicians, researchers with industry, and researchers from outside the organisation with researchers within the organisation.
All right, thank you very much for that.
So, the eyes of the world are going to be on Brisbane in 9 years' time when the Olympic Games are based here in Queensland. So we've got a great opportunity to try and profile through that event the excellence of Australian medical research and translational outcomes. One of the things that TRI, working with the Queensland Government, is doing, will be undertaking over the next 2 years, is building a GMP scaling manufacturing building, which will allow us to support biotech companies develop their product at GMP specifications to support their first go at clinical trials, phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials. Wow. And what I'd like to see our researchers aspire to spin out a company with their tech transfer companies supporting them, and that those companies will move their program forward and actually manufacture in Southeast Queensland at the TM at TRI facility.
That's very impressive. I wish you all the very best for the future, sir.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's been great talking to you, and I look forward to catching up in the near future.